All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the life and mysterious death of Natacha Jaitt.
Oh, yeah, this one is fascinating.
Yeah, so we're looking at her Wikipedia entry for this one. A lot to unpack here. A very controversial career, legal troubles in Argentina and Spain.
Yeah, both countries. It's interesting how her early life kind of hints at the bold choices she made later on. I mean,
Oh,
just
yeah.
imagine leaving Argentina for Spain with like basically nothing, $10 in her pocket, just to try and get on Gran Hermano.
A Gran Hermano, that's, you fill us in, that's a reality
Yeah,
show.
yeah, like the Spanish Big Brother, a bunch of people living together, cameras everywhere.
Oh, okay, okay.
And here's the thing, she wasn't even like a main contestant originally. She was a reserve, so only if someone dropped out.
So she flew all the way over there with, like, no money, just on the hope that she might get on the show.
That's Natacha Jaitt for you.
Wow, gutsy. And did she actually end up on it?
Oh, yeah. And not just that, she like totally captivated the audience, ended up in third place.
No way. Yeah, the first reserve contestant to ever place that high on Gran Hermano really knew how to make an entrance.
Yeah, it sounds like her life was like one big dramatic story. So after the reality show success, what came next?
Well, she became a panelist on Crónicas Marcianas, which was huge over there. Late night talk show, lots of like edgy humor, celebrity gossip. Think, I don't know, The View meets Chelsea lately, but in Spanish.
Oh, okay. So she goes from reality show to like primetime talk show. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, holding her own with some big personalities too.
And then, well, her Wikipedia also mentions hosting an adult program on Playboy TV and posing for magazines like Playboy and interviews her. Was she going for this kind of provocative image intentionally?
It's hard to say for sure, but she definitely wasn't shying away from it. It's like she was trying to do both, be successful in the mainstream, but also embrace this risque side.
Having it both ways.
Exactly, and not apologizing for it.
Definitely pushing some boundaries there. And then in 2007, she goes back to Argentina. Yep. And typical Natacha Jaitt, it wasn't a quiet return. She became a sponsor for the International Festival of Erotic Cinema in Buenos Aires. We're talking like major names in adult entertainment, and she's right there with them.
Wow, okay, so leaning into that image even more. And was this around the time of that incident, the on-air orgasm during a live TV interview?
Ah, you're talking about the Crónicas Marcianas incident. Yeah, that was something else. Imagine that happening on like a major U.S. talk show today.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
People were losing their minds, shocked, amused, some outraged, the whole spectrum.
That's wild. But it seems like she was more than just, someone who made headlines. There's mention of theater work, a play produced by a pretty big name in Argentina, even a dance competition show.
Right. She was definitely talented, ambitious. It's easy to forget that with all the other stuff going on.
So did her career ever recover from things like, the on-air incident? Or did that kind of overshadow everything else?
It's tough to say, but you gotta admire her fearlessness. Even if it meant facing backlash, she was always taking risks, challenging the status quo. It's what made her.
Definitely a captivating figure. But her life wasn't all just bright lights and big moves, right?
Yeah.
There's this whole other side, the legal issues, the controversies.
Yeah, things get a bit darker there. In 2017, she was caught up in this high-profile extortion case, accused of blackmailing a sports journalist, wanted a ton of money to keep quiet about his affairs.
Okay, that's pretty serious. And what's the interesting part?
Well, it gets complicated. Turns out Jaitt was one of the women he was having an affair with. Talk about a messy situation.
Wow, so she's blackmailing him for an affair that she's involved in. That's crazy.
Yeah, the media had a field day with that one. Relationships, accusations, legal battles, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, I bet. And then she gets involved in this investigation into sexual abuse at a football club in 2018.
Yeah, that's when things get really intense. She goes on this super popular talk show and just drops these bombshell allegations, implicating journalists, even politicians in the whole thing.
Whoa, accusing powerful people on live TV. That's bold.
Talk about shockwaves. It was huge. The talk show host ended up apologizing for even having her on. Imagine that.
Wow, what a mess.
Her testimony did lead to some detentions early on, but it didn't really stick. 2 of the people she accused were actually acquitted of the abuse charges, but they were found guilty of promoting prostitution.
So it was like a lot of legal back and forth, but no clear resolution on the actual abuse allegations.
Yeah, it's complicated. Definitely added another layer of controversy to her already controversial public image.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with all this. And then right before her death, She makes another accusation in 2019.
Right, against a director and another individual, claimed they drugged and raped her. And this was all still going on, the legal battle, when she died.
Oh, wow. So this is all happening before her death. Okay, so tell me about that. How did she die?
Yeah.
What are the theories?
Well, in 2019, she was found dead at this party hall outside Buenos Aires. The whole scene was strange. She was naked, in bed, and no signs of violence right away.
A seemingly healthy woman found dead like that. It definitely raises some red flags.
Yeah, and her lawyer was pretty vocal right from the start, saying he didn't believe the official reports, that she was murdered.
Murder. Wow.
Wow.
Were there any suspects?
No one was ever charged with murder, but a businessman was arrested for false testimony related to the case, like someone was trying to cover something up.
So more questions than answers. And did Jaitt ever say anything that, like, could help explain what happened?
Well, there's this one tweet she posted about a year before her death. It said, "Notice, I am not going to kill myself. I am not going to overdose on coke and drown in a bathtub. I am not going to shoot myself in the head, so if that happens, and no, I didn't do IT, save this tweet."
That's creepy. Like she knew something was going to happen.
It's eerie, right? Almost like a premonition. And tragically, that's where we stand, with a life cut short and so many questions still unanswered. What do you make of it all?
It's hard to say, but there's definitely more to this story than meets the eye. She was a woman who lived life on her own terms, very open about her sexuality, not afraid to challenge norms. It makes you wonder if maybe she was a victim of a society that wasn't ready for her.
That's a fascinating thought. Was she ahead of her time, challenging things that others weren't ready to face? We'll dive into that and more when we come back for part 2 of our deep dive into the life and death of Natacha Jaitt.
It's hard to believe that, after everything she accomplished, her life ended like that. So many unanswered questions.
It really makes you think, about how unpredictable life can be. But before we get too caught up in all that, all the darkness surrounding her death, I think it's important to remember just how much she did. I mean, we've talked about the reality TV, the talk shows, even the adult entertainment stuff, but she was also involved in theater and even remember that dance competition show.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's easy to focus on the scandals, but she really did try a lot of different things, different kinds of performing.
Yeah.
What do you think? Why do you think she was drawn to those more traditional forms of entertainment?
Well, maybe she just, I don't know, constantly needed a new challenge, a new way to express herself. Or maybe she was trying to prove that she was, more than just a provocateur. Remember, this is someone who moved to a whole other country with like $10 and ended up on a hit reality show. That takes a certain confidence, a belief in yourself,
Yeah, definitely. It makes you wonder if maybe, like, even the way she pushed boundaries in her personal life, maybe that was also a form of self-expression, like saying, this is who I am, take it or leave it.
That's a good point, yeah. It's like she was challenging societal norms on all these different levels, her career, her outspokenness, being open about her sexuality. It's pretty interesting.
So do you think that that defiance, that refusal to kind of fit in, do you think that maybe played a role in her downfall?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's possible that, all that challenging the status quo made her some enemies along the way, people who felt threatened by her. Remember the talk show host who apologized for having her on, and then that businessman who was arrested for lying to the police after she died? There were definitely people who wanted to, at the very least, control her story, if not silence her completely.
And then there's that tweet, that creepy tweet about not committing suicide. It's hard not to think, like, maybe she knew she was in danger.
Right. It definitely makes you think. Like, she was aware of the risks she was taking, knew that being so outspoken could have serious consequences.
And if we bring this back to, our listeners, what do you think Natacha Jaitt's story tells us about the price of fame? Especially for women who, aren't afraid to break the rules, go against what society expects of them.
I think it's a powerful reminder that fame can be a real double-edged sword. You get a platform, a voice, but you also become a target. Her life was constantly under a microscope. Every little thing she did was analyzed and judged by the media and the public. It's a cautionary tale, really, about the dangers of fame, especially for women who don't fit the mold, who challenge the status quo.
And nowadays, with social media and everything, that pressure is even more intense, right? Everyone have a platform. Every moment can be, like, broadcast to the whole world. Makes you wonder what her life would have been like if she'd been dealing with all this in the age of Instagram and Twitter.
Oh, I can't even imagine. The scrutiny would have been relentless. But I think it's important to remember that even though she faced a lot of challenges, she was also incredibly resilient. She kept pushing forward, kept pursuing her passions, kept speaking her mind, even when she knew it would cause backlash. She was pretty remarkable in that way.
Yeah, she definitely wasn't afraid to ruffle some feathers. But beyond all the controversy, it seems like she really did want to connect with people, to entertain them, maybe even make them think a little bit.
There was a vulnerability there too, underneath all the tough exterior. Don't forget, she was a mother, a daughter, just a person trying to figure things out, just like the rest of us.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that sometimes, especially with how fast the media moves these days. People get reduced to headlines and sound bites. But her story reminds us that there's always more to the story, more to the person than what we see on the surface.
That's what makes this whole deep dive so interesting, I think. It's not just about exploring a life, it's about understanding a complex person who, didn't fit into any neat little boxes. Someone who left a real impact, even though we're still trying to figure out exactly what happened to her at the end.
Speaking of which, let's get back to those unanswered questions about her death. We know the official reports weren't clear, and her lawyer said he thought it was foul play. What are some of the theories that people have been talking about?
Well, there's the theory that she was murdered, that someone wanted to silence her. Remember, she made some powerful enemies with those accusations during the football club scandal. She wasn't afraid to call people out, even if they were influential.
And we can't forget that tweet, the one where she basically predicts that if she dies under suspicious circumstances, it wasn't suicide. It's hard to ignore that.
Absolutely. That tweet has definitely fueled a lot of speculation. Some people think she might have been involved in something dangerous, something that ultimately led to her death. Maybe she had information that could have exposed a whole network of powerful people involved in illegal activities. Who knows?
That sounds a little like conspiracy theory territory. Is there any real evidence to support that, or is it mostly just speculation?
A lot of it is speculation, yeah. But there's some things that make you wonder, like, why was that businessman arrested for lying to the police? What was he trying to hide? And why haven't there been any real answers about what happened?
Good questions. It seems like there are a lot of loose ends, a lot of unanswered questions that, keep people talking about this case even after all this time.
Exactly. And sometimes not having answers is just as unsettling as any of the theories out there. It leaves you with this feeling that, that justice hasn't been served.
So we're left with this unresolved tragedy, this woman who lived such a complicated life, celebrated by some, condemned by others, and then it all ends so suddenly and mysteriously. It's a story that really makes you think, makes you question everything you thought you knew about fame, about justice, about how fragile life really is.
It reminds us that the truth can be really hard to find, especially when there are powerful people involved who might want to keep things hidden. But it also shows the power of living life on your own terms, even if those terms are, controversial. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah. And I think even with all the controversy, there's also this sense of sadness. Like Natacha Jaitt deserved better somehow.
I agree. It feels like her life was cut short before she could really reach her full potential, before she had a chance to tell her own story.
It makes you wonder what she might have accomplished if she'd had more time, if she'd been able to live without fear.
That's a really good point. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I think it's important to think about what we can learn from all of this, how we can honor her memory, and what questions we need to keep asking to find out the truth, to make sure justice is served.
It's like we've been putting together this puzzle, but some of the pieces are just missing. We've talked about her ambition, pushing boundaries, all the legal stuff, and then that tragic end. What do you think? Like, what will her legacy be? Natacha Jaitt's legacy? I mean,
that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some people will only remember the controversy, the scandals, the shocking stuff. But others, they'll see her as, someone who stood up for herself, for women, someone who refused to be ashamed of her sexuality.
Yeah, it's interesting how even now, after her death, she's still such a polarizing figure. Do you think she understood, like, the impact she was having, challenging all those norms?
Oh, I think she knew exactly what she was doing. She understood the power she had, to get attention, to make people talk. I mean, think about it. One thing she did on live TV, and people are still talking about it all these years later, she definitely knew how to push buttons and get a reaction.
But was it just for shock value? Or was there something more she was trying to say?
I think it was a little bit of both, honestly.
Really?
Sure, she liked to provoke, but she's also, I think, trying to expose the hypocrisy of it all. You know, how society often punishes women for being open about their sexuality. It was like she was saying, this is me, deal with it.
And that message it's even more relevant today, I think. With everything going on, women are still fighting for equality, for the right to control their own bodies, their own stories.
Absolutely. Her story, even though it ended tragically, it reminds us that women shouldn't be shamed for embracing their sexuality. It's a conversation we need to keep having, even if it makes some people uncomfortable.
It makes you wonder what she'd be doing now.
Hmm.
You know, what causes would she be fighting for? What boundaries would she be pushing?
Oh, she'd probably have a huge following on social media, right? Using it to speak out against injustice, to get people talking about sexuality, gender equality, abuse of power, all that stuff.
Yeah, hard to imagine her staying quiet about anything. She never backed down from a fight.
And that's what makes her story so powerful, so relevant. It's about a woman who lived life on her own terms, who refused to let anyone define her, to silence her. It's really inspiring.
It is. It reminds us that we all have the right to be ourselves, to express ourselves freely, to challenge those norms that try to hold us back.
And it's a call to action, you know, to keep those conversations going, to fight for what's right, to honor her memory by speaking truth to power, no matter what.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life and death of Natacha Jaitt, I'm feeling, I don't know, kind of sad, but also inspired.
Hmm.
Sad because her life was cut short, and there were still so many unanswered questions. But inspired by this woman who dared to be different, to challenge everything, to live a life that was, well, anything but ordinary.
Yeah, well said. And I think that's a fitting tribute to someone who lived such a captivating and controversial life, someone who left a mark on the world, even if we're still trying to figure out exactly what that mark means.
And maybe, just maybe, by talking about her, by keeping her story alive, we can get some justice for her. Not by solving the mystery of her death, but by remembering how she lived, with defiance, authenticity, and a refusal to be silenced.
That's the best way to honor her legacy, I think.
So to all of you listening out there, go out and live your lives authentically. Challenge the norms that try to box you in, and never ever be afraid to speak your truth.
That's what Natacha Jaitt would have wanted.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye for now. But keep those minds curious, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive into the lives that shape our world.